hopefully we're starting to get this. Look, this whole section this time, again, was about authority. Be careful. He was definitely getting in the face of those in authority and also warning you to be careful the authority under which you come, which you choose to fall under or to come under. And so, look, I've said this often, with Ephesians chapter 4, the fivefold ministry, that you are responsible to find those guys. Okay, it's not their responsibility to come find you. You need the apostle, prophet, teacher, shepherd, etc., evangelist in your life. And so you have to go find them. Okay, so this is what we call the afterburn. All right, so if you have a comment or question, you can raise your hand. Steve will come around with the mic. If you're on the live stream, I've got Kurt and Rob together today on the live stream desk here in person, so it's good to have them both together. Okay. All right, so who's going to get us started? All right, Steve, go ahead.
I have a comment and a question, kind of. Romans 2, 17, 20.
Romans 2.
17, 20.
Okay.
That isn't actually an instruction for us to go out and get a YouTube channel and be a light to the blind, but it's more for us to be the light to the blind by how we walk our life.
Correct. I mean, he's trying to tell, but he's also talking to the Jewish community and saying, look, these are instructors, okay? So in this particular case, he's talking to the teachers and the leaders saying, look, understand the responsibility that you have. If you're going to claim that you're so wise and so smart and you're going to be teaching another, and he says you're going to be an instructor of the foolish ones, etc., remember the accountability of the double judgment of the teacher. Okay, who's next? Okay, Sarah Beth.
I know you gave pieces of this in this teaching. I know you've talked about it before, but in this particular context, talking about the masquerading as light, how can the untrained see through the masquerade to find a trainer/teacher, a true one, especially when you've said, like before in Torah days and stuff, don't feel bad. You're not supposed to get this by yourself. How do we see through the masquerade to find a trainer or teacher, to be taught the truth? How do they know what to look for?
Well, look, I mean, at some point, part of this is going to be the Ruach, and you have to submit to the Ruach. But you got to be careful, though, because when you're trying to submit to the Spirit, to the Ruach, there's also that voice of yours with the I like and I prefer, and this resonates with me. Try to figure out what resonates with the Spirit, not just with you. And then when you do is you hold it up against Scripture, and you'll find almost all of these teachers at some point are going to teach something that you're going to see just doesn't match. Also, when you find an anointed appointed, that teacher should show you something you'll be like, I've never seen that. Oh, that answers all these questions for me. You'll start to get those revelations through the anointed teacher if that's what you have. That's when you go, I've read that 500 times. I've never seen that before. Now it finally makes sense, okay? So you'll start to get those moments. That doesn't guarantee you're in the right spot, because some of the false ones can do a few of those, but just keep paying attention. They'll eventually do something where the Ruach will say, there we go, time to move on, okay?
Thank you. One part that clarifies the question of what you said, like they'll deviate from the Scripture. If you don't know the Scripture well enough to know that they're deviating it, if you can't see clearly because you're so new, or how do they...
Well, again, part of it is you're going to have to ask the Father to show you the person you need to submit to. Now, bear in mind, the word submit is the hard part for all of us, okay? In other words, just because I teach, we'll use me as the example, and you seem to think that I'm in conflict with the Scripture, doesn't mean I am necessarily, and that could be the same thing with any teacher. So you should be able to go and ask that teacher to make their point or make their case, but it really has to do with, can you get to the place where the Ruach is telling you, this is where you're supposed to be. This is the anointed, appointed teacher. And a lot of you have gotten to that point where you recognize that, and others have not. But it's got to not be about, but I like the way this person teaches. Okay, I like their style, or I like their personality, or they're gentle, and I prefer gentle to the blasting that maybe I give them or whatever. Some people prefer the blasting to the gentle, whatever. Everybody's different. But where are you supposed to be? And that's where you got to trust at some point, if you can get out of the way, to ask him to tell you where you're supposed to be. Okay? And then if he places you in that place, then be there and allow for it to play out. Because if you give it some time, you may come to realize what you thought was wrong by the teacher really wasn't. It was you, but it may take some time. Because some of you have told me that there were things that I taught and you heard it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and you just were like, but now you're looking at it going, oh, I get it now. So it's not just you deciding that you hear something that doesn't match up. Some of it's going to be obvious, okay? And so, when you hear them limiting the amount of law being taught, or they're trying to do away with circumcision, or they're teaching once saved is always saved, things that you can realize are undermining Scripture on whatever level, those are more obvious things. Some things are not so obvious, okay? And so that's where you have to allow for the teacher, okay? Especially if the teacher's making a Deuteronomy 17 type call on something that maybe the Scripture does not say specifically, okay? We've had that challenge here, for example. People have left because I've not insisted that women wear tzitzit. There's no Scripture saying that women are mandated to wear tzitzit. Of course, that is an argument that I've had with people that have left. But now you could decide, rabbi's teaching against Scripture. Well, that's not the same as something that's clearly, overtly there, and then people are teaching against something that says thou shalt or thou shalt not. But again, you have to decide how you're going to work those things through, okay? But of course, I've had people leave here over the tzitzit thing and then go to places where the teacher doesn't even wear tzitzit. I'm like, so that's better? Okay? Why would you leave here? Because I won't. Now, by the way, I've never said the ladies can't wear them. I just won't force the issue. By the way, I don't force the men to do it either. I mean, none of you, if you're wearing them or not, have ever had me come up to you and criticize whether you have them on or not, or even what color they are. Okay? I've taught from the microphone, and that's all I have to say about it. I'm not here to micromanage your life. But then this is kind of what we're talking about in this, then how do you go from here to a place, wherever it is, where the men aren't wearing it, the teacher's not wearing it, and that was your whole issue? It makes no sense to me. I'm thinking there's more going on than that. But that's what I'm saying, is that you have to decide, can you see through, is it an emotional trigger that you're responding to, or is it a unemotional, logical, rational thing that you're doing? Because see, if you're responding, for example, to my not teaching women that they have to wear them, and then your response is to go someplace where nobody's wearing them, that's not rational, okay? That's hypocrisy. That's a whole different problem. And we all know that this has happened recently, so I'm not, and I'm not trying to attack anybody. I'm just saying, but this is the kind of stuff we're talking about here, okay? Where you can be emotionally responding to something, and so you're not actually doing it for the reason Scripture lays out. I would have more respect for people that would then go someplace that had everybody wearing them, if that was really what they thought was the issue. Then I'd have more respect for that. Okay? You would agree. Okay? So, and people do leave teachers for many reasons, and that's their choice, and they can move on and go wherever they need to go. My job is not to worry about that. My job is just to teach. So I teach whoever's in front of me. I've taught at some places, people are like, how could you go teach there? Because they gave me a microphone. But don't you know that group teaches this? But I'm not teaching that. If I go there, it may be the only time they hear something other than whatever disconnected stuff they normally get from their teacher. I had somebody, because I went and spoke at a few places where people were like, and they thought somehow now I was connected with them. No, I'm bringing light into that darkness. Somebody wants to give me a mic, I'll go speak. But they're not going to influence what I say. Okay? When we first came back into ministry in 2010 or whatever it was, my wife said, well, who's going to listen to you now after the whole journey we're on and everything else? I said, I don't know. I'll get a mic and somebody will, if people want me to talk, I'll talk. If they don't, I won't. My job's just to teach. Your job's to do whatever you're supposed to do with it. Okay? I don't come up to any of you and go, are you doing what I just said? Are you doing what, I don't try to micromanage any of that. I don't think any of you have ever had me come up to you and get in your face about your Torah observance. Now, if you don't show up here for a couple of weeks, I might kind of poke and say, hey, where have you been? And then if I know where you've been, then that's fine. But, I just want to make sure that you're okay. Now, look, if you're, some people are at home and they're watching live stream, that's fine. But there are other people that they're avoiding here because maybe they're not dealing with something or they're going and doing something else or whatever. I just want to check in and make sure, is there anything I need to talk to you about? Because some of you travel a good distance and you may just stay home and that's fine. I just want to make sure you're all right. Okay? Is that fair? All right, so look, and some of you are thinking, well, he shouldn't be talking about those people. Why? It's exactly the kind of thing that we should be talking about. And by the way, I heard this the other day and it came up in a discussion, Deuteronomy 18, where it talks about what to do when you have a problem with your brother. The last step of it is to tell the congregation, do it in front of the congregation so the congregation knows what's going on. So some of you are like, well, why do you talk to the congregation about some of these things? Because you need to know what's going on. Because by the way, all those people have not ceased doing all of this. They're all talking. They're talking behind my back and they're saying all their stuff. So at least this way you can hear the other side of it. Because they're posting on Facebook. I love, my favorite ones are those very clear, unclear posts. You know what I'm talking about? Where clearly they're aiming it at somebody or something, but they're not openly naming names. But those in the know, quote unquote, are supposed to get it and know who they're talking about. And they think they're being clever. I don't know. It's pretty obvious what's going on. You know what? If you've got a problem, either be quiet or come right out and say it. Stop being a coward and hide behind your the ambiguous way that you put these things out. Okay? If you're calling people out and you want, then let the rest of the world know that you're attacking somebody. Don't attack somebody indirectly when everybody knows that's what you're doing. They just don't know who you're doing it to. And so they're left to guess. Okay? I would recommend that you don't post that kind of stuff. But if you've got a problem, then say who it is. Let everybody know that you're having a little emotional fit. Okay? Take your thumb out of your mouth so you can type better in Facebook. And tell everybody what the fit is really all about. And stop being a coward. Actually, stop being a coward. Why don't you just either be quiet or go and face the person you have a problem with? Instead of hiding behind your keyboard and your screen, typing, these little memes that are like, don't you just hate it when leadership blah, 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 or I blah, blah, and but everybody knows you're trying to lash out about somebody you're mad at, and they're all forced to guess. Oh, I wonder if they're talking about this teacher or that leader or this thing. Or worse, some of you do it and you wonder if the wife is talking about their husband or the husband's talking about their wife, because some of them are not about that kind of leadership, but you wonder if they're trying to embarrass their spouses. Shame on you for that too. Of course, if it's about your children, go right for it. It's fine. Embarrass them all you want. They don't take any shame in embarrassing you. And I'm kidding. Public, private, they'll embarrass you anywhere they are. I'm kidding. Just, you know what? We don't need to be trying to publicly do all that kind of stuff and shame each other. You never see me post stuff like that. Go on my personal page. You haven't seen me post anything since August or something like that. Okay? I just stopped posting. But even then, before that, I don't post this kind of stuff. If I feel like I have a problem with you that's worth talking about, I'll talk to you. How's that? Because there's a lot of jawing going on behind my back. And people say, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so. I said, yeah, but they're not talking to me. Because I'm a whole scary 5'5", 200 pounds right here. Frightening. But they're not talking to me. But you know what you should be doing? You should be shutting that down. Somebody starts, you should look them in the eye and say, did you have this conversation with whoever it is you're talking about? No? Then I don't want to hear it. Then I don't want to hear it. Years ago when I did the Are You Saved teaching, Tony Robinson, who hated it so much, put all these rebuttals on YouTube about it, whatever. Sent an email out to all his group calling me a heretic. And one of the people that responded sent me a CC of the response. And he said to Tony, he says, I don't know what this guy taught. I don't really care. I just want to know one thing. Did you go to him like Deuteronomy 18 says? He says, that's what I want to know. And I responded back to him. I said, first of all, no, he didn't. And second of all, you'll not get a response from him, I guarantee you. And he didn't. But that should be your response. You hear people talking about me or talking about somebody else, say, I'm not here for that. I don't need to hear all of this gossip and blah, 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 blah. Because otherwise you're going to be guilty of doing the worst thing you can do, making some sort of judgment on one side of a story, and all you got is half of it. And let me tell you something. I've done some studying of late, and some of the psychology people in here can tell you, when you're in an emotional place, events no longer play out the way they actually happened in your head anymore. They get bigger and smaller in different ways. They get skewed. They get a little bit of a time warping thing where certain events are not in the same order anymore. When you're upset, you do not tend to remember things the way they actually happen. That is an actual psychological fact. The more upset you are emotionally, and by the way, it could be a good emotion. The more good emotion, you're still not going to remember things exactly the way they happen. That's why when two people fight over something that happened an hour, a day, or a week ago, neither one of them really remembers it exactly right. And they're arguing with them. That's not what it has. They can't remember it. They're too angry. And so you don't remember what you said or what happened in the right order. So now you're hearing someone who's upset tell you their side of how they saw it and through their filters and their added and subtracting of what really happened. Because they'll add things that didn't happen. They don't know they're doing it. And they'll take away things that did happen. They don't know they're doing that either. This is how their emotional memory is now responding. So shame on you for just taking that as somehow you know it. There are people in here that have made that mistake, and then they finally came and talked to me and heard the other side of it and realized, wow, that doesn't match up. That doesn't mean they believed me, but they just realized there are two sides to a story. Okay? And so you're not getting the truth out of the emotional response of one person. And I've told every couple that has been banging heads and clashing, they come to me for counsel together, or even when they counsel with me separately, and I said, look, just so you know, after I hear your part, I will absolutely still not know what happened. I tell them that. And even if I hear both of you, I still won't know what happened, except for what you both agree that probably happened. The part you agree on, I'm fairly confident probably happened. The part you don't agree on, I have no idea what happened. You're probably both wrong on some of it. You're both emotionally warping what happened through your emotions. And this is what we deal with. This is not walking in light. This is walking in darkness. This is actually being a child instead of being children of Elohim. What, are we still in junior high school or middle school or whatever school you went to where we're that teenage range where all we talk about is, that's all they do. They do it now digitally, all on Snapchat and Instagram and all the other things. They just all gossiping and whacking at each other with their mouths and their words and their typing. And, you know, the accessibility is different than when we were kids. You had to actually go to somebody's house or ask permission to make a phone call because it cost money. Every call, right, was a charge. So it was different. They have the access now with their technology all the time, 24/7. And don't you think, parents, that they're not doing it while you're sleeping? Oh yeah, they've got those things going. And so just understand that we're acting like that. You know, we did that as teenagers. I get it. We were emotional. We're going through that whole change from kid to adult and all the other stuff. But so, why are we still acting like that as adults? You know, we're still acting like cowardly children. You can't go face somebody and say, hey, I got a problem with what you just did. Or I got a problem with what you said, or I have a problem with whatever. and go work it out. And we're supposed to be the people that are going to live forever together. And we can't work out this baby stuff because we're still led and ruled by our emotions. That's sad. The body needs to grow up. All right, who's next now that I just blasted all that? Now, let me just ask you, because this is your profession. Was I right about what I said?
Absolutely, Rabbi.
All right, see, because that's her area of expertise, the whole emotional thing. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yes, I was convicted with Romans 2:23. And then I have a question. When it says, you who made your boast in the Torah through the transgression of the Torah, do you disrespect Elohim? And I was looking at my main ministry, which is my family, with my children and my husband, and I need to be congruent with what I say I do, but I'm not really about doing the commandments, but more about the fruits of the Spirit when I got convicted.
Okay.
So that was the first part of my comment. And then I do have a question on 2 Corinthians 11:15.
Well, hold on. Let me just, with Romans 2:23. Okay, so make sure you're reading it as she did, or just you who make your boast in the Torah, comma, even though there was no comma in the Greek. Through the transgression of the Torah, do you disrespect Elohim? No. Understand, there are those of you that want to respect your parents or your mom or your dad. Well, it's Christmas time, and they invite you over for Christmas dinner, and you don't want to disrespect them, but are you going to disrespect Elohim? And that's where you sometimes have to really find those balances. Are you, in your effort to respect people, disrespecting him? Now, you can still respectfully say, no, you can decline the human part of it in order to protect and respect him, your creator. Just be careful that you're not, in your effort to not disrespect those, when it talks about, are you concerned more about the praise and the reflection, how man will see you, than how Elohim will see you? There is still a respectful way to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that, or I can't come over, I can't whatever. All right? Go ahead.
Okay, so 1 Corinthians 11:15, talking about the servants of Hasatan. So my question...
2 Corinthians.
Yes, 2
Okay.
Corinthians 11:15.
Okay.
My question was about recognizing those servants. To follow up from Sarah Beth, I will probably think that the ones who are teaching lawlessness are the servants of Hasatan, and maybe the way we recognize that will be through their fruits. Is that a good way to...
Well, to some degree. I'm just saying is that it's easy for you to recognize that the mainstream of Christianity is not teaching right. Okay, that part was easy enough, and that's why you're here. But how do you recognize, as you're listening to the literally thousands of Torah teachers or claiming to be Hebrew roots, Messianic, whatever, that are available to you on YouTube and everywhere else, how do you discern through the mixture that is? Okay, so let's think of Christianity as being like, I'll be generous. Let's call it 60-40, 40% right, 60% wrong or whatever. But now you go and listen to some of these guys today that are more like 60% or 70% right and only 30 or 40% wrong. So they're way better than where you were, even if they're like 80-20. But that's harder. The more right they are on most things, the more it feels like it's okay, because after all, they figured out the very basics of moving from Sunday to Saturday. They stopped eating the unclean foods, and they're keeping feasts instead of Christmas and Easter and that kind of stuff. So that makes them look a whole lot better, but then you're still receiving Baptist theology or charismatic theology or Catholic theology, or whatever it is, when it comes to all of the doctrinal positions, not the walking specifically, but the way you understand things, like the once saved, always saved idea. Okay, that's not scriptural, but it certainly comes out of the Baptists and others that believe very strongly in that idea. And so you will have ones who are teaching Saturday and feasts and all this other stuff, but they're still teaching the doctrinal positions of where they came from. And you can hear that because I didn't come from any of those places, right? So I shouldn't say that. At this point, I've been doing this long enough that I kind of know a little bit of what some of them sound more like, but not really, okay? But if you're listening to somebody, you go, I know they came from Baptist, or they came from Lutheran, or they came from Methodist, because you can hear certain things that you know came from where you were, and you recognize that, all right? And so there's some teachers out there that have been doing this for 30 years that I've had somebody come up to me and say, oh, I can still hear the Baptist in him. But I wouldn't recognize it necessarily, okay? But if you're a Baptist, you do, okay? All right? When I talk, especially when I talk, people will say, I can still hear the New York in you. Because you can recognize it. It still comes through. It's not as strong as maybe it was, unless you hear me talking to one of my friends who is on the phone who's in New York, and then it really gets ridiculous, but... All right, and people can know, oh, he's talking to one of his friends back home because it gets thicker than that. But the point is, that's the same idea positionally or doctrinally that also can come through, okay? So what you're looking for is that harder discernment where so much of it is now right. So there's so much less that is wrong that it becomes harder to figure out. Where there was so much more of it that was wrong and so little of it that was right, it was easier to figure out, okay? Just like when you came out of, a lot of the Protestant churches came out of the Catholic Church, they switched so much of it, but so much of it they didn't switch. I mean, if you're protesting the Catholic Church, why do you keep Sunday? The Catholic Church gave you Sunday. Catholic Church gave you Christmas and Easter. I mean, what are you protesting anyway? You just don't like the Pope? I mean, what does it come down to, okay? So this is, what we're talking about, all right? And so that becomes tougher to discern the subtlety. Look, as a person who wasn't in mainstream, I found it really tough to know the difference between a Methodist, a Baptist, a Lutheran, and whatever. The Charismatics were easier because they were much more openly gestures and, they were much more effusive, okay? They were really more energetic that way. So I could figure out the Charismatics being different. But if I was talking to somebody who was, one of those other ones, and by the way, there's 57 types of Baptists, so how would I know the difference? Okay? I didn't know there was that many different ones, but, but there are. Look, when we went to Sukkot, we met a guy who's a Sabbath-keeping Baptist. He's part of the Seventh-day Baptists, okay? So they're Baptists, but they're Sabbath keepers. And they saw our shirts and had a meal with us, and there was some sort of a leadership conference that was there. Hey, I didn't know there was Sabbath-keeping Baptists that have actually Sabbath-keeping Baptist churches. So what we're talking about here is it becomes much more complicated in terms of discerning the more subtle things when more and more of it is right. And I'm not saying that those guys out there who I tell them they should probably put their mics down, that they have nothing right. They have a whole lot more right than the churches do. Some of them have a whole lot right. But then you're going to be stunted in your growth. You got to be careful. Problem is discipleship. We haven't really had proper discipleship. We haven't had it was easy in post-Yeshua's resurrection to know these were the 12 and then know who they trained, and so they had a very straight lineage. We don't have that today. So then it was really tough. The first person that it was tough with was Paul. All right, Paul wasn't through any of those lineages. He had to make a really tough argument to the 12 that he should be looked at as an appropriate teacher. He had to go to Jerusalem. He had to go before James and Peter and the rest of them because he did not come through a discipling process through the original 12. And so he had to make a case, hey, I was discipled by Yeshua, and that I'm on the same page with you guys, and we're working together to serve the body effectively, kind of like what we're trying to do with M2I, right? And so we don't have that lineage, or by lineage, I don't mean by genealogy, by your birth, but by a discipleship lineage. This one discipled by that one, discipled by that one. Okay? We lose that very quickly through the first, century or two after Yeshua. That disappears very quickly, all right? So then it becomes much tougher. Well, you can come to me about any other teacher. That's assuming you think I'm anointed and appointed. And if you don't, I mean, okay? Look, and it's hard because, look, I am who I am. I believe that I have the role that I have, okay? And I don't try to impose that on anybody. But the thing is, I also have those that will listen to me and say, that guy's full of himself and he's got an ego that's out of control and all this other stuff. I don't know. How would you sound if you were actually an anointed, appointed in front of a microphone? What would that sound like if it was you? How do you balance all that if that really was your role? And again, either I am or I'm not. I just know that I feel that I have this role to do. It's for you to decide whether or not you see or feel that's there. But the thing is, if it really was true and I really was appointed and anointed, or any of you are, what would that sound like? Would it sound any different? What would you expect? Let's say Paul was right here today talking about all those guys on YouTube. What would you expect him to say? Or John, or James, or Peter? What would you expect them to say about all those teachers out there? Would you not expect them to say the same stuff like Paul's saying in here about there are false ones out there, false emissaries, being deceptive, who are masquerading? What would you expect them to say? Oh no, you would expect them to say, like a lot of them saying, oh, it doesn't matter that we have differences of this. We just need to love and come together. And it's not about conformity, it's about unity and blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry, blah, blah, blech is what it is. I see in Scripture unity and uniformity. They were all to come in one mind, in one way, together into the fullness. It says here that the fivefold ministry are there for the perfecting the set-apart ones, to the work of service, to a building up of the body, until we all come to the unity of the belief and the knowledge of the Son, to a perfect man, meaning having full integrity, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah, no longer being tossed about by everybody out there teaching everything. That's Ephesians 4. Well, somebody's got to get up and say something. Of course, everybody can stand up and say the same thing. Now you're stuck in the same quandary. This is between you, the Heavenly Father, Messiah, and the Ruach to help you figure that out. Lots of people out there are claiming that they're anointed and appointed. And if they're not saying it out loud, they're acting in a way that makes you feel like they are, whatever. And I feel for you. That's hard. Okay? You have my empathy and my sympathies in that challenge. I don't have a way to tell you that. I wish I could say that the clouds in the heavens opened up and placed us somebody. I'd like there to be somebody other than me that I could point to and I can go disciple with them. Then it takes all that burden off of me and I can point to that person. We may not get that until the two witnesses. That's our struggle. There may not be that official endorsed, and even then, most of the world's not going to believe them until they are killed and resurrected after 3 days. Then they're going to be like, oh, we get it now. Okay? Okay, so we're stuck with, you have to do that discernment. That's hard, because I believe the reality is that there are false ones out there, and you have to figure out, is it me? Is it whoever else you're listening to on YouTube, wherever it is? How do you figure that out? How do you, and I can't figure it out for you. Now, if you're going to come to me, I can give you my opinion and other people, but then you have to decide if you're going to listen to my opinion. That's your choice. I am absolutely, in case anybody on YouTube land or live stream wants to hear this, I have zero interest in micromanaging anybody's life. I don't want to make decisions for you. I don't want to have any responsibility for any of that. I say what I say from the microphone. I say what I say in private counsel, but I will not come and impose or check on you or question. It's your walk. You are responsible for you. Those you hear that know me, you know that I'm saying absolutely 100% the truth. I have people that are mad at me because I won't make their decisions. They're like, please, every decision I make is bad. Will you just make a decision for me? Nope. You got to learn to do this. Okay? I'm not going to do that. And I used to, and I've stopped, but when people would ask me about something, they would say, well, what would you do? And I used to tell them, well, if it was me, this is what I would do. Then I realized, they're not me. It might not be the right thing for them or whatever, and I don't want them to be overly influenced just because I would do something. Okay? So I don't do that anymore. Because sometimes people say to me, well, my boss just told me that starting in January, we're going to have to work, 2 Saturdays a month. Well, I know what I would do, but I don't know what you would do. And that doesn't mean I'm right. I'm just saying but my telling you what I would do may overly influence you. Do you understand? I can give you guidance from Scripture on how to help you make that decision. I can give you counsel knowing you on how to make that decision. But you have to make the decision. I'm not going to make it for you. I'm not even going to tell you necessarily what I would do, because I don't want to overly influence that. Okay, I have a different personality and different way. I may be overly zealous. I may do something a lot quicker than is necessary just because that's my personality. Okay? I have, contrary to other people's opinions, I have no fear. It's so funny, one person once said that I thought I was basically, I operate under fear. It's funny. So I don't have a problem with a boss saying, well, starting next month, we're working Saturdays. I said, that's okay, I'm not. So you could either be okay with that, or I can go look for another job. I don't care. And some of you would be too afraid to do that, which is okay. You're still growing and going through your walk, and that doesn't mean I'm right and that I maybe not overreact. I think there's a little period of time for you to transition that while you're figuring it out, and we could talk about and counsel that. But if you're still figuring it out a year later, you're taking too long. Well, he wouldn't want me to not be able to pay my bills. Well, why do you think that that's going to happen? I can't tell you how many testimonies I have of people that lost their job, quit their job, made their stand, and got a better job like within a week. And others, it took a lot longer, but still, they survived and they got a better job and they got a better situation, whatever it was. Do you trust him or not? What are you afraid of? But since I don't operate out of fear, I would just say, okay. I don't get mad. People get so angry. I can't believe they're messing. You didn't even love the job before anyway. Now you're all protective of it. I love when that happens. That's like my favorite conversation. I've had a year of listening to a person tell me how much they wish they could change jobs and find something else. And then all of a sudden they're about to lose their job and now they're all, I'm going to miss my job. I need my job. I'm like, really? You moaned and groaned and whatever about it whined about it for all this time. Now Abba gave you a way out and now you want the job. Really? So we're all different in how we handle things. So just understand that that's important. I teach as strong as I teach from the mic, and we counsel, and believe me, there's a lot more gentleness in the counsel most of the time. And so sometimes you need it stronger, so there's that when it's needed. But I'm not here to get personally involved in your daily activities. I don't care what kind of car you buy or what color it is or whether you have a house or an apartment or any of that stuff. Now, you may want counsel to help you make financial decisions, and I can help you figure out the way to make those decisions, but it matters not to me. Which job you take doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter to him either necessarily. He wants to see you make decisions because making decisions is the reason you exist. That's another teaching, right? That's important. There was a question that launched all of that, but we'll go on to the next question. Okay, Rabbi Tom.
Thank you. You mentioned these posts that are evidently aimed at someone without mentioning the person that they're aimed at. I may get in trouble for saying this, but it really wonders me why there are people in MTOI or Beth Shalom who, when they read these posts, they put a like or a smiley face on them. And I have to wonder, do they consciously or subconsciously agree with them, or are they just that naive?
All right, that's a really good point. Let me kind of give you my answer. Well, first of all, if you know somebody's recently left, don't be surprised when all of a sudden their amount of posts goes up by 1,000-fold. That seems to happen. People that almost never post, all of a sudden, when they get all emotional, they post 15 times a day. Now, if you are reading a post that has a certain edge to it and is kind of calling out something, it may resonate in your life to something you're going through. Ask yourself first, before you hit the like button, why did they post it? Because you may not want to like what they're trying to say, even though it's saying something that matches something you're going through, but it may not be what they're going through. And then you hit the like button, and people looking at it go, why are you liking that post? Don't you know why they're posting that? Are you agreeing with them? Are you joining in that almost Lashon Hara type of thing? I don't like anybody's posts. I don't mean I don't like them. I don't put, okay? Now, my wife posts pictures. I like all of those because I know it's good for me. Because otherwise she'd say, well, didn't you see my pictures I posted? So I will like all of the pictures that she posts. And I always do like them. I mean, I like a lot of posts of people. I'm just not going to put my name on something and have somebody not understand necessarily if I understood it correctly, and now I'm connected to something that I could have misunderstood. So why do you feel the need to click like or love when you don't know? And if you do know, then why are you joining on the same sort of Lashon Hara type of thing? Because really it's cowardly Lashon Hara. That's what it is. You're trying to hurt someone's reputation and attack them in a public way without actually mentioning their name, so that the inside crew will know who they're talking about. And shame on you when you do that. You got to knock it off. And there's people in this room right now that do that. Not just people that are not here in this room anymore. And I'm not talking about the liking the posts. I mean even making the posts. You think they're clever and you think they're all cute and you're making your point. Well, make your point either by saying it actually clearly what you're talking about, or don't make the point at all. You know, the little post said, well, don't you just hate it when, or doesn't it just, well, what are you talking about? You got an axe to grind. Well, then go grind it with the person you have the axe to grind. You know? Don't just put it out there in public. And you've got to be careful about it, because those of us that know they're talking about us, we notice who's hitting the like button. Okay? And there's times when you know something's about you. You know that that's why they're posting it. You know exactly what it's about. Other people might not. And then you see people hitting the like button. And you know that they probably have no idea what their thing is really about and hitting the like button, because after all, it had an edgy sort of feel to it that you could find resonates in your life somehow. So you like the point, but don't understand the point. The point was a inside joke on somebody. That's really what it is. It's an inside joke on somebody. So don't like those posts. All right, who's next? Okay, Deirdre.
So I have two questions and two thoughts that came to my head. First question I'll ask, it's probably obvious to some, but I like to verbalize my thoughts. So Ephesians 5:3, well, 3 through 5, really. It's not just talking about the physical versions of that, but it's also talking about the spiritual. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So my second question kind of piggybacks off of Sarah Beth and Janet. So back when I was in Christianity, there was this book that my mother read and then passed down to me, and I do not agree with this person anymore, because things just are weird now that I've come under your leadership. But this person claimed to have had contact with spiritual beings that identified themselves as angels, and before they would come to her, but before they even got a chance to start speaking to her, she'd say, "Stop! I need to know who you're from," and because she wanted to just make sure, I know, quote unquote, but they would give her like some sort of thing to appease her or whatever. And I'm not saying that she is correct. I'm just throwing out that disclaimer, but. How, and you mentioned, Hasatan masquerading as Messiah, and he will do that. I believe he will do that at the end time, the very, very end. So how do we, as followers of Torah, kind of, should something like that happen to us, not that I think it will, in terms of
So,
seeing the heavenly
something
beings.
and having somebody talk to you. Okay.
Yeah. How would we identify, yes, this is really from Yahweh?
Well, take the information and experience and bring it to me, and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, it is an experience to start with, and then what you do with it later, and how to interpret it, and what to do with it, can be talked about. By the way, when you are listening to like the book she had, or people putting prophecies out and all these other things, your first question should be, is this person Torah observant? If they're not, why are you even entertaining it? Okay? I'm just saying that because that's probably the same thing with this person who...
Oh, yeah, this is when I was in Christianity.
Right, this is a person that wasn't. But also, again, I have people send me emails all the time with links to this or that on YouTube of somebody, prophesying this and prophesying that. And these are people that are not Torah observant. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to have any thought that Yahweh's speaking to me through a Gentile, really. Okay? Through a Sunday keeping, Christmas, Easter, pork, whatever. If he wants to talk to me, he'll talk to me through a Torah observant person or directly. I'm not going to get my information. Now, remember, some people say, yeah, but what they've said has come true. Well, so that's Deuteronomy 13. There are people that are going to say things and they're going to come true. That doesn't make them true, as far as the being a prophet or not. But I've had people send me all this stuff. I'm like, why are you still listening to these people? Because everything they said has happened so far. But that's just to get you to be more locked into those people and that system. Stop listening to that stuff. If they're not covenanted and Torah observant, stop listening to them. Can I be more clear? I think that's scripturally correct for me to say that, okay? All right? You need to stop being fed by and buying into stuff that's not coming from covenanted people. All right. What else?
Okay, so just a couple thoughts that came to my head while you were talking. You mentioned the whole idea of mixing the truth, with the lie is like arsenic, and I have actually heard of people who will, give an example, dilute snake venom. People who work with snakes will dilute snake venom with water and then inject it into their veins, thinking they're going to build up this immunity to it. Or people who have taken, poisons little by little.
That's to deal with the specific, counteracting to the actual poison. Okay, that's as opposed to, just taking in the poison, thinking you're just eating. Okay, people that deal with snakes on a regular basis need to have an anti-venom, which comes from the venom. All right, so that's a complete different approach, okay? They're doing that so that they can handle something specific, and it's a one-to-one direct relationship, all right?
Okay, thank you.
So somebody's not taking, snake venom and doing all the snake venom stuff because they're having a problem with tarantulas, okay? It's snake with snake, and it's the kind of snake that they're used to dealing with. And it's specific snake. They're not just getting, because each snake's venom is going to be a little different too, whatever. So that's a very direct relationship, trying to make sure that they're able to handle something or counteract something. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about just poison in general that you can't taste, you're not aware of. These people are totally aware that if I handle the snake, I might get bit and get the poison, so I have to have a way to handle that poison. We're talking about people that are going to be just joyfully, feasting away, having no idea that they're eating poison. All right, so it's a completely different thing.
Okay, thank you for that correction.
You're welcome.
So my last thought was, you mentioned, Messiah didn't just keep the Torah for the sake of being a Jew, which make me think that if Yahweh had intended for the Torah to have been done away completely, Messiah would not have been born a Jew. He would have been born a Gentile.
There's something to that. But of course, the prophecies all were that he would come from Judah, and all these things were there, so we would know that he would come from Judah. And Judah was, of course, the one that would maintain the Torah availability to us all so that we would have access. You would not have all this in your book today if the Jews did not maintain it every time the world tried to put it, exterminate them. All right? And every time I say that, somebody goes, oh, we have it because God wanted us to have. Yes, but he chose the Jews to do it. Because he knew they would, that it didn't matter what you did to them, they would not give up, they would not quit. Okay? as a people, not all individuals. I know a bunch of Jews that keep nothing, but I'm saying is, but within that community, that there would be enough heart to not quit and be willing to die for this, okay? Where others may not have been the case, but he knew that they would do that, and so he picked them for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, who's next?
I just wanted to, this verse here that kind of stood out to me, Ephesians 5:8, it says, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light." For me, when it says that you were once darkness, it encompasses who you were. Like in other teachings where you talk about the intrinsic nature, like you were something, and so that just stuck out to me.
Okay, so let's be careful with that verse. If you notice, when I read it, I didn't read that part. Okay, because it's in italics, it's added. It's sort of the Christian mindset that you've already arrived. It doesn't actually say that. It says, "For you were once darkness, but now light in the Master." So now you have light in the Master, so walk in that light. So the "you are" is not in there. Okay? All right, so let's be careful with that. You were once, you were in darkness. You were darkness, but now light is available in the Master. So he wants you to say, so to have that, walk in it is what he's saying. Don't just say, "I've arrived, I'm light, I was darkness." And that's the finished, saved thing that Christianity tries to throw out there. Okay? And so they added the words "you are," but it doesn't have that. It's in italics in your book, isn't it? Okay, because it was added. Okay? You were once darkness, but now light. Light in Messiah. You have light in the Master. So now you have something. So you were in darkness, and now there's light. But you have to walk in the light. But he's saying, look, in doing so, he says, "For the fruit of the Spirit is all goodness, etc., etc." You have to now prove what is well-pleasing to the Master. Why would you have to do all that if you are now light? See, that's where they get this idea that now we're Torahs unto ourselves. We have light in ourselves. Now we've arrived. Well, that's a bad translation, okay? So I'm glad you brought up the verse, because if you notice, when I read it, I skipped that part. Some of you maybe didn't because you were reading along and didn't realize I just didn't say it, because I skipped the italics words. I've been doing that a lot lately just so you could hear the difference, because the italics words I don't think always get it right. Okay, and in this case, I think it does more confusion than it helps. Now, the answer is yes, you were once. When you walked in darkness, you were darkness. And if you would only walk in light, you would be light. That's kind of what he's trying to say. Okay? You are what you're walking in. Okay? You're darkness when you're walking in darkness. You're light when you're walking in light. The thing is, you can transition from one to the other as often as you want. Just because you're one doesn't mean you can't change to the other, and vice versa. Now, thank Yah, that's possible, because when you were in darkness, you could become light. And if you mess up and go back to darkness, you can repent and come back to the light. So that's a good thing. All right, live stream.
Okay, from Lori Bornstein, it says, when we do somehow fall into darkness, knowingly or unknowingly, is that how we grieve the Spirit?
Look, I would say that we've talked about this a little bit. I think it grieves the Spirit when you knowingly choose to go back into darkness. When you are lukewarm, or when there's the dog going back to its vomit, this grieves the Spirit. Just like any parent looking at their child going, I taught you, I've explained this to you, you should know better. Anything that you do that anybody would look at you and say, you should know better. That's what you feel grieved when a person is like, you look at them like, you could have avoided all this, you should have known better. You knew better. Parents say this to their kids all the time. I don't understand. Kid comes to you, no, this is all went wrong, and this went bad, and this broke and you look at them like, I don't understand how that happened. You know better. I know you knew better. That grieves the parent. So when we talk about grieves the Spirit, yes, when you do stuff you should know better, that's grieving to the Spirit. Okay.
From Mike Guti, says, question, according to Ephesians 5:17, could you expound on what the desire of Elohim is?
Well, I mean, look, what is the desire? Well, I don't know. There's one way we could answer that. What desires? What he wants. What does he want? He wants a bunch of people that are going to be submissive to his authority and obey everything he says. But what does that actually look like? It looks like Yeshua. What did he do? He kept all the Torah and he kept it in the fruit of the Spirit. What does it look like? Look from the beginning of the covenant to that Sinai. Look at all the way, go back to the beginning of Genesis, where you could see that this is what he's expected of people, to do what he says. What is his desire? His desire is not to do away with what he said. His desire is not to disobey what he said. His desire is not to excuse that it's no longer necessary to do what he said. That's not his desire. But by the way, that still goes back to verse 10. You have the responsibility to prove what is well-pleasing to him. It is well-pleasing when you do what he desires, what he wants. And what does he want? Obedience, trust, faith, belief in what he does. He wants you to trust him. He wants you to submit to him. And please understand your big struggle with that word submission is that it doesn't even start until you don't like it. Yahweh's going to put you through some things you're not going to want to do, you're not going to like. That's the time that submission gets tested. When you get all excited about what he's doing and run to do it as fast as you can, that's not submission. That's just you desiring to do it and be pleasing, and that's great. He wants that too. But he also wants you to trust him, and trust doesn't come until you have to submit, because you don't see it, you don't get it, you're afraid of it. What if it goes wrong? What if it doesn't work? That's when you're not trusting him, that's when you won't submit. By the way, so submission is not just when you are like, don't agree or don't want to do it. It's often because you are afraid to do it. What if it doesn't work? What if it goes wrong? What if I can't find a different job? What if I lose this one because of the Sabbath? What if? Well, when are you going to just trust him? Where's your faith? Yeshua said, when I come back, am I going to find anybody with faith? Emunah? So I got you 12 in the boat, you're freaking out, and I'm right here with you. It's like, hey guys, I'm like right here. But we're going to die. No, you're not. Okay, next question.
From Yanni, it says, question about the poison and the name Jesus versus Yeshua. What about movies? Today I saw the story of Ruth, 1960, and the Gospel of John, 2003. It's hard to find something tahor in the world.
Look, I don't have a problem necessarily if you find a movie and if someone's going to use the name in it or whatever. It's not like it's magical in a good way or a bad way, like it's somehow going to taint you. It's not like like someone said, oh, if you say the devil or you say this or you say the word hell or whatever, it's going to bring something on yourself. It's not like that. If you're watching a movie and they use those terms because you want to see something with some Bible stuff in it, and you can get, which I think is actually, some of them are pretty interesting to watch, although it is the NIV. But, you got the book of Matthew and the book of John that were put out, which is basically a word-for-word reenactment of the book. And all the dialogue is the NIV. So you're going to listen to NIV, which is hard to listen to anyway. But if you want to do something that's biblical, you're going to have no choice. All of the Bible movies are pretty much going to have the Jesus name in it if it has any New Testament stuff in it. And so it is what it is. So that's up to you how you handle that or not. But that's different than if you were to go to a service and hear the preacher saying that. I couldn't sit there and listen to that. Okay, it would find it too irritating and distracting for me to have that put forth in a teaching format. Okay? That's just my own personal thing. It would just be like a little poke or the scratching on a board or something. It just would irritate me just because I know how much that's still trapping the people listening into that image, into what that represents, even if they've come out quite a bit. Okay? Because I've been in places like Worldwide Church of God back in the day where mostly what they were teaching is probably spot on. They had a lot of stuff that was very right, but the name was still enough to keep them just that far off, And so it's so that you're not susceptible to when the false one comes and uses that name. And then you don't think, oh, look, it's Messiah. You know? That's why you have to go back and listen to beware false prophets. Okay, that's the teaching you got to listen to so you understand what I'm talking about. I think that teaching now has got 50,000 views, which is pretty amazing. So, as Hebrew roots teaching goes. Anyway, but that teaching has been around for a while. I first did that teaching in 2001, I think. So it's been around for a while, but that recording's not available. So anyway. Okay, so Kurt, you do know that the camera's picking up all the games you're playing with Alice, just so you know. Yeah, okay. All right. They're playing peekaboo over the computer screen. All right, Rob, go ahead.
From Chris Blown, says, Ephesians 5:2 says, Yeshua gave himself as an offering. I've heard you say before that him dying on the cross was not a sacrifice. Could you help me understand this better?
Yeah, he offered up his life. Look, if somebody came, okay, and threatened me or threatened my wife, and I'm standing right there, and I say, take me instead, right? I'm offering myself in exchange. That doesn't make me a altar, sacrifice to the gods, okay? It doesn't make me like a sacrifice to Yahweh that would have been done in the temple. It's an offering, meaning I offered myself in your place. It's a different type of offering. It's not an offering as in temple sacrifice. Okay, so if somebody threatened my family member and I jump in front and say, no, let them go, take me, I'm offering myself instead. Does that make sense, hopefully? I don't know if the person asked the question, but that's the difference, okay? When he says, no greater love does one have but to lay down or offer his life in exchange for his friend's life. Okay? Offering your life in exchange for is not make you a temple sacrifice. Okay? It doesn't make you a human sacrifice from a religious point of view. Okay? It makes you a friend who's willing to take your place in exchange. Let that person live, take me instead. And that's what he did, right? His death made it so that we could live. Okay, next question.
From Pat Novak, through your teachings, we're reminded the many ways that the Christian churches dismiss the need to obey commandments. What are they professing exactly with their teaching when they're teaching the gift of righteousness?
I couldn't tell you a thing about what the churches are teaching. I don't know how to answer that question. Okay, so they're talking about something called the gift of righteousness. They're probably talking, if I'm going to guess, the idea that they have the imputed righteousness of Yeshua, so therefore they don't need to do anything. I don't know. So they consider that a gift. I'm guessing. I don't know. I've never heard their teachings on that. Okay? I've heard plenty of their teachings of the law's been done away with and nailed to the cross and all that stuff. But as far as that, I'd be guessing.
Okay, from Stephanie Henderson, question, Rabbi, when you spoke of the image of Yeshua, how do we get away from the images we've seen the majority of our lives? And what is a proper way of imagining him, if any?
Look, you don't have to picture him with any particular likeness, okay? I mean, he probably looked like many of the people that you see that are native to the Middle East as far as skin color, and so he probably had, dark hair and darker skin and that kind of stuff. I mean, he, remember, this is like on the border of Africa, and they've got all that Middle Eastern part where everybody generally was darker skinned and tended to have dark hair and the whole thing. So you can't nail down that whole what he looked like, and I think it's a waste of time for us to try. Every culture tries to make them look like them. Okay? So, of course, being the dominant white thing that has been going on for so long, they made him look like a very white, pale, whether he's blonde or brunette or whatever they wanted to make him look, because that's the image they wanted to relate to. But you got to also remember he looked like everybody. He didn't stand out in a crowd. There wasn't anything to make you go, ooh, look at him. I mean, he just looked like everybody. He could blend into a crowd. He was just your average, everyday everybody. Okay, as far as looks. But, picture him in his position and understand what it's about. I don't ever really think about what he looks like. I know that might be hard if you spent your whole life worshiping an image of him and having pictures of him and crosses in your churches and all this other stuff. But, realize that that's not what he looked like. Okay?
From Katie Angelo, question, when is the line supposed to be drawn when sharing the light with people of the Christian faith who say that's good and all, but I like my belief system?
I don't even know why you're even having the conversation. No, I'm serious. I mean, that's a Christian thought. You have to share your beliefs with people, and share the gospel, and share this, and share your testimony, and share. That's not scriptural. I'm not saying that you hide it, but there's no line to cross if you don't feel you need to do it. If it's part of a natural conversation, then you share what you share as part of a natural conversation. As far as the natural conversation will allow it to go, as it will naturally flow. But you don't, see, if you're thinking you have to get information across and convince them of something, now you're looking for where the line is, okay? There is no line. Let your conversations be natural and flow naturally and go where they go and stop where they stop, okay? Because after all, if their eyes and ears are not opened, the best possible scenario is that you have someone who's just curious enough to let you talk a little bit. You'll have probably zero effect, but you may at least have planted a seed, and not the seed you're thinking, not the seed that will open their eyes, but the seed that when their eyes are open, they'll remember that you talked about it, and they may come to you to ask more questions. Because a lot of people say, well, I'm just trying to plant a seed. Understand, your best possibility there is that the seed that you planted is that they will remember that you were talking about Yeshua and Torah and that stuff, that if Abba at some point opens their mind and their eyes, they'll say, oh, wait a minute, I remember so-and-so was talking about that stuff. Maybe they can help me out in here. That's the seed. Not like you're planting a seed and that's going to cause their eyes to open. Okay, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so I don't mean to poke fun, but I mean, when you ask where we draw the line, I'm like, why? Understand, well, why are you even having the conversation? If it's a natural conversation, a natural line will be drawn. At some point, they will say to you, I've had enough. I'm not interested in the subject, but watch them. Let them, in their body language and in the way they're speaking, demonstrate when you're now talking and they're not listening. But you get excited about stuff, make sure your audience is just as excited, or just don't. I talk to almost nobody about this that doesn't want to talk about it. Like, I don't witness to people. And a few people have asked questions. I've only asked a few, and I've answered their questions, and then it stops. Look, I used to wear everybody out with this stuff, and then Abba had mercy on everybody and gave me a microphone. I'm not kidding. You ask my wife about some of her friends coming over, and I was so excited. I've done what you're talking. I've done all that. It didn't bear any fruit, by the way, except it wore a bunch of people out. Now, I had people that were polite enough not to fight with me over it generally. Well, mostly. There was one or two, but, there's plenty of people that, if you're on live stream, you already know plenty of people that if you want to talk about this stuff, be happy to talk about it. Talk to each other about it. All right.
From Colin Speak.
Hey, Mr. Colin, how are you, my friend? Colin.
Are we not now circumcised of the heart and under the new blood ratified covenant of Yeshua? The old marriage contract being broken by Israel at Sinai.
Okay, wait, hold on. And Colin's from the UK area. Give me that again. I didn't follow the whole question.
It says, are we not now circumcised of the heart and under the new blood ratified covenant of Yeshua, the old marriage contract being broken by Israel at Sinai?
not probably the way you're trying to put it. Okay, look, there is a Jeremiah 31:31 covenant that's coming. It's not here yet. I haven't gotten there yet. And that's when it says, and I will renew my covenant with Judah and Israel. And then there'll be a new covenant with Judah, well, with Israel altogether in Jeremiah 31. We do have the beginnings of the journey into that relationship. And Yeshua renewed that relationship through his blood. And, it talks about those in Ephesians, where they're in chapter 2, where it says they were once without Messiah and without Elohim, and now they're brought near by his blood, etc. But the circumcision of heart is not an event, just like being saved is not an event. Circumcision of heart is something we continually have to do. Okay? Because the heart is desperately wicked and hard to understand. Who can know it? Jeremiah 17:9. And so we have to be aware that it's not, as Christianity would give us, somehow a finished event. Yes, we have Messiah and his shed blood, which did start a process and did create a new situation. But that new situation is to allow us to go back into covenant, the covenant that we broke. Actually, we didn't. Our forefathers did and other ancestors did. But a covenant that was broken. But as far as it was, if you're going to call it a marriage covenant, which I think is appropriate, we haven't had a new one yet. We're still waiting for that wedding. Okay? And so we're continuously circumcising our hearts and getting ourselves in line and coming into the alignment and the transformation and the conformity with the image of the Son as we go in that direction. And that's coming into the same covenant, which is obeying the voice. Following Yeshua was the same for ancient Israel as is today. They just didn't know him as Yeshua. They knew him as Yahweh. So I hope that answered your question, Colin.
Pete and Brenda Lamb says, would Rabbi Steve agree that the litmus test for discernment is whether or not what is being preached conflicts with Torah?
Well, that would be true but you'd have to have enough discernment to know the difference. You'd have to know if something actually conflicts with Torah, so that would be tough. Let me go back to Colin just for a second in that I want to make sure that the other part of this is that I don't know if Colin was talking about it or not, but don't think that if we're now dealing with circumcision of heart, that somehow that takes away the need to circumcise flesh. That has never been changed. Okay? Just be clear that I've said that over and over again. Circumcision of flesh has always been required. Okay, now, as far as that point, the question there, say it one more time.
He was asking if the litmus test.
Yeah, okay, so Paul Lamb was saying, okay, yeah, it'd be a good test to see whether or not something matches up with Torah. The problem is you may not be qualified for that at the beginning. It'll take a while before you actually are qualified to know if something lines up with Torah. Because after all, you're just learning something. How can you be qualified to know if something lines up? That's really been the biggest problem with most of the teachers out there and most of you who are trying to figure out teachers. Because I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, well, I really like your teachings and you're right about most things. And I want to know before they tell me that, what's their qualification to tell me that? Have you been doing this for a long time and trained? I'm not saying right off the bat, I'm not going to let anybody tell me I'm wrong, but I want to know what qualifies you to tell me I'm wrong. And so before you tell somebody they're wrong, you ought to ask yourself, am I qualified to tell somebody they're wrong? All right? Because now you're going to bring some judgment on yourself if you're not qualified and you're actually wrong. I would be really hesitant to tell people they're wrong. Okay? Because you just may not know enough to know. We play this game. You've played the game. Have you ever been wrong? All hands go up, And have you ever been wrong about something that you knew and you still were wrong? All hands go up. Any chance you'll ever be wrong again? Yeah, all hands go up. Any chance it'll again be something that you knew? Yeah. Well, then why are you telling people they're wrong? It may be you. Yeshua's going to show up, and when he does, he's going to say a few things. You're going to go, really? Because you're going to find out you were wrong. That's, as they used to say, that's the facts, Jack. Okay? That is going to happen. And so Let's be careful with telling people they're wrong. Are you qualified to do that? Okay. So the litmus test, yes, Paul, I think it's a good litmus test if you actually know enough Torah. Now, let's say it's an area of Torah that you actually have studied out, you feel comfortable with, you really do know it, and that area is now being taught wrong by a teacher, then hey, that would be enough for you to know that sermon may be wrong. But if you're brand new at this stuff and you're just starting to walk this out, it'd be like, one of the little children in here, 4, 5, 6, 8 years old, whatever, coming up and trying to straighten one of you adults out. Okay? And you look at them like, I've had to have a conversation with some of the teenagers and say, look, you don't know what you don't know yet. Anybody have to do that with a teenager or younger? They get in your face and think they know everything, and you have to look at them and say, I'm sorry, but you don't even know that you don't know, because you haven't lived yet enough to know what you don't know. If you're new at Torah observance, new at covenant, new at this whole thing, this Messianic Israelite thing, whatever, you don't know yet what you don't know. You know a few things that you didn't know and that you're starting to learn now, but you have no idea the depth of what you don't know. I'll prove it. Go listen to something that I taught that you haven't listened to in a couple of years and see if you don't hear a bunch of stuff that you now didn't realize you missed the first time. Because you're in a different place now and you can receive it. Go check that out and see if you're like, wow, I don't remember that. Well, because you weren't ready to receive it then. Because you didn't know enough to receive. There's a lot of stuff that you're hearing now out of your book. And you know what? I've met a lot of Christians. And a lot of Christians who tell me, oh, you should come to my church. We study the Bible. We study the Word. And even if they're just talking about the New Testament, I could take them almost anywhere and show them they still don't know. Because they don't know what they don't know. And you've seen a lot of things that we've gone through. Like when we went through Romans, we went through Hebrews, when we did that as part of the covenant teaching, and a bunch of people were like, wow, okay. You didn't know what you didn't know. Or like even some of you today who are first time on live stream hearing that circumcision that Paul was talking about had nothing to do with circumcision. It had to do with how they were born, either into or not into covenant. It was not talking about the physical act, although the assumption was that those born into it had it done on the 8th day. But if you don't know that that's what Paul's talking about, then you have no context for this. Same thing like with the are you saved thing. If you hear me talk about the way I talk about salvation, once saved, always saved isn't right, you may think, oh, no, I know that teacher's wrong, and stop listening. But maybe you don't know enough to know that the once saved, always saved thing isn't scriptural. I got a whole movie just was put out attacking that, the whole idea that I would say that once saved, always saved is not real. I mean, in actuality, once saved is always saved. In other words, what he did is forever and it will always be there. It just doesn't get you anything. You have to do something to get something. That's the problem with the once saved, always saved, is that they say, being saved, now you get everything. That it's a status that gets you something. No, it's a status that makes something possible. And that status will always be there until you make your choices. And you get to decide what you do with it. What he did doesn't ever go away. He did it once for all. That's it. Does it mean anything to you? It can mean everything or nothing, depending on what you do with it. If you don't do anything with it, it might as well not have happened. You'll end up still just as dead as you would have if nothing had happened. Do you understand that? If you do nothing with it, it might as well not have happened. Now, if you do something with it, it's the most momentous thing that ever happened in the universe. It made it possible for you to live forever. There's nothing bigger than that. Of course, but if you don't do anything with it, it may as well not have happened. Because as far as you're concerned, it won't have made any difference. You'll end up just as dead with no future and no hope. Hopefully that's clear. All right.
From Michelle Perez, says Ephesians 5:11, having no fellowship with, is that also no fellowship with those not keeping Torah, like example, Christian friends?
No, it's very clear. It says, with the fruitless works. So don't participate when they're doing things like, don't go to their Christmas party okay? Don't participate in the drunkenness and the idolatry and the other things that it talks about, the filthiness behavior, whatever. Don't do the things that are fruitless works. That's the fellowship. I've got friends that are in the world. I've had them my whole life. But I don't do the same things with them that I used to do with them. If they're going to go do some of those things, I don't go with them. Be a little tough, actually, since none of them live here. But if I was visiting, say in New York or something, there are things that I would not do with them that we used to do. Places I wouldn't go. I could still hang out with them, provided we're not doing fruitless works of darkness. Because that's what it says, have no fellowship with the fruitless works of darkness. Okay? Does that make sense? So you can still have Christian friends, Gentile friends, whatever, friends that you ever had, of every size, size, shape, type, whatever. Just don't participate in the fruitless works of darkness. Things that could cause you to go into darkness. That's really more the thing. If you participate, you'll be going into darkness. So don't do that. Don't participate. Okay, next question.
From Lisa Hersey, says, Rabbi, is there another place in Scripture which talks about that we should only have one teacher for discipleship purposes?
No, there's no place that says that, but you have to understand what discipleship is. Discipleship is a relationship with a teacher. Okay? Nobody was discipling with 4 apostles. Okay? That's like even in Paul's day, right? It says, I'm of Barnabas, and I'm of Apollos, and I'm of Paul. Right? The ones that were discipling with him said, I'm of Paul. The ones that were with Apollos said, I'm of Apollos. That was their teacher. That is what discipleship is. Okay? So it's not that there's a verse about it. It's just the definition of the relationship. In a discipleship relationship, there's that one-on-one. Okay, you don't disciple with 3 teachers at the same time. Well, I shouldn't say that. You could disciple with as many teachers as you want, provided each teacher is for a different discipline. You can disciple in music with one. You could disciple in construction or art with another one, or in some sort of other job. You can disciple with people in different disciplines. But when it comes to Torah issues, and only one teacher for each thing. Okay? If you're wanting to be an electrician or a carpenter or whatever, if you start discipling with one guy and then you're now listening to another guy, you're going to frustrate the first guy when he starts saying, well, why are you doing it that way? I didn't teach you that. Oh, well, I learned that from this other guy. He says, oh, no. I'm your teacher. You need to do it this way. Okay? That's discipleship or apprenticeship. Okay? So you can have more than one as long as it's for a totally each different thing, unique thing. All right? You want to learn to play guitar? You can go disciple with a guitar player, how to play guitar. Now, you could also just learn from a bunch of people without discipling. Discipling is a very specific relationship. So I'm not saying you can't have lots of teachers. That's not discipleship, though. All of you right now are not discipling. There's teachers out there, by the way, that think this is discipleship. No, you're all sitting, listening to me. We have no relationship necessarily just because I'm talking and you're listening. Now, there are some of you that I have more of a relationship with. I'm saying, but just because you're sitting here doesn't make you a disciple. It means that I'm teaching and you're listening, so maybe you're being a student at the time, just like a teacher can have a room full of students in secular world, right? You have classrooms with 20, 30, 50, whatever it is, kids. In colleges, there could be 200 in a lecture hall. That's not discipleship. That's a teacher and students. Discipleship is a unique type of teacher-student relationship. All right, next question.
Okay, last one. From Steve, in Ephesians 5:16, can you explain redeeming the time?
Well, redeeming the time, I'm guessing, is saying, look, when you recognize you've squandered a bunch of time, you've wasted a bunch of time, and I'm not going to do it anymore. That's sort of the idea of redeeming the time. You can't go back and make up for it. But what you can do is you can recognize that you've been wasting time and now focus on not wasting it anymore. Okay?
Okay, I'm just going to go to the end part where you were talking about Yeshua laying down his life for us, that it was not human sacrifice and it was not temple sacrifice. I'm just a little confused because it refers to him as the Lamb of Elohim. Can you do a little bit more on that?
Well, look, as a metaphor, what was the lamb that was used for the Passover used for? To have death pass over. So in that metaphor, he's the lamb that who shed blood caused death to pass over.
Thank you.
So it's simply a metaphor for functionality, not a metaphor for the actual act. But in both cases, blood was shed, and because of the shedding in both cases of blood, death passes over. Okay?
Thank you.
You're
Because in Christianity, when we hear lamb, we think of temple and sacrifice.
But also remember, Yeshua was not killed in the temple.
Right.
Okay, he wasn't on an altar. And so he wasn't part of that per se. But the metaphor is that he is functionally serving the same function as the passing over death that the lamb's blood did. So death would pass over. Okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, Janet, go ahead.
Yes,
you got as many questions until the children get here.
Oh, no, I just have one, Rabbi. Ephesians 5, when it says, verse 5, it says, one greedy of gain, and it's also mentioned in verse 3. So, as Catholic, growing up, and even as a Christian, I don't maybe not as a Christian, but as Catholic, this issue of money was always perceived or taught as something that wasn't, you shouldn't make money. That the rich will not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. I know you have told us before that it's okay to get money. In fact, we should be productive. So when does it become an idolatry? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
This is where we get really bogged down in our challenge. It's just like the question about fellowship. Are we supposed to not have fellowship? If you read the whole verse, it said fellowship with the unfruitful works, right? In this case, the same thing. It's not gain that's the problem. It's greed. And greed causes you to do things improper, take advantage of people, cheat people, okay? So it's the greed of gain. Gain isn't the problem, okay? So it's those that are greedy for gain or greedy, no one greedy of gain, because if you're greedy of gain, it's that selfish, willing to cheat, willing to do anything to have the advantage, unequal weights and unequal measures, whatever they're going to do, okay? Manipulate, abuse, take advantage of, that's the problem. So gain is not the problem. The whole phrase is the greed, and the greed is the issue, okay? All right.